Hey guys, how's it going? I hope you're all doing great, as I always say, and in this video, I have more stories from all over the place. I got a story from Australia, a story from Montana, a story from New Mexico, and a story from somewhere in the US with a lot of forest. That doesn't really narrow it down, but that's all I got for that. Anyways, if that sounds like your cup of tea, then definitely pull up a stump and let's jump into it. Thank you for watching. So this one night, me and my brother were in our bedroom. We shared a room, and we were just chilling on the floor. It's late at night, and our parents are asleep. We aren't supposed to be awake, so the lights are off. We're just quietly talking to each other and messing around with Lego or something. I don't quite remember that part. We're more or less whispering back and forth, non-stop like kids do. Something suddenly crashes downstairs. It's probably the cat knocking something over. We both pause, but the whispering doesn't. We look at each other. We are definitely not doing it. Something behind my brother moves. I go to say something, and I get a brief view of it as a car passes. What I can only describe as a mummy is lying under my brother's bed, looking at me. It's not a bandage-type mummy. This thing looks like a body that's been left in the sun for decades. Has very big teeth. It's reaching for my brother. The whispering is the sound of its skin rubbing up against the floor. I scream and jump up and turn on the light. It's there for a split second, and then it's gone. My brother thinks I'm crazy. He didn't see it. I never tell him exactly the description of what I saw that night, but I shove a bunch of boxes and sleeping bags under his bed, and I make up something about seeing a mouse under there, and he doesn't really question it. I never saw it again after that. So I was just about 9 miles or so outside of the Los Alamos National Laboratory in New Mexico. It was around 11 p.m. and my camp is set, so my friend and I decided to explore the woods since we're pretty deep out there. And by this time we're quite far away from the campfire and we're walking by moonlight. And all of a sudden we hear this mechanical sound miles off in the distance. It's a sound like resembling large gears or pistons that are moving or causing friction. This goes on for maybe 5 minutes. And then this incredibly low and deep bass sound begins. It literally feels like my eyeballs and organs are vibrating from the intensity of the sound. We hide behind huge rocks, but nothing seems to block us from the noise. It seems like it's coming out of the ground. We end up saying screw it, and we run half a mile or so back to the camp because the sound is just nauseating at this point. Our huge fire is completely out, but smoldering. It doesn't look like water was poured on it, and there's no way that it burned out that fast. Maybe 45 minutes after the low frequency started, it stops, and all the insects, owls, and frogs have completely stopped calling for the rest of the night. The rest of the night was pretty uneventful, and so was the next day when we left, but it's just really weird. So this happened in 2015, and for a little background, I drive for the railroad company out in the Pacific Northwest, all over Washington State. I drive the conductors and the train staff to their hotel or to their next train or wherever they want to go really, because their trains are usually stopped in the middle of absolute nowhere, and I'm actually based in Spokane, but I got a call to Whitefish, Montana. It's a really good run and pays well, but it can be a 15-hour plus drive. So there's a lot of deep woods and back roads and pretty desolate areas there. It's the beginning of winter, so it's kind of cold out and you can see your breath and that sort of stuff, you know. I just made it out of the panhandle of Idaho. I'm on this dark freeway. There's literally no one on the road but me. And I start seeing roadkill on the side of the road. And I think, well, no biggie, it happens. But there's an awful lot of it. I count at least 2 or 3 deer, a bunch of small animals like skunks, squirrels, and raccoons. I slow down and put my high beams on because I'm afraid one of the carcasses might be in the middle of the road. And keep in mind, I'm driving this big-ass SUV. So I see another deer on the side of the road and I slow down even more. And that one doesn't exactly look like roadkill. The flesh looks torn up by some animal or something with claws. There's steam coming out of the wounds like it's fresh, and I think, oh, Mother Mary Joseph, oh, what the hell's going on out here? So I speed up a bit. I just want to get out of this road and get to civilization. A little ways down the road though, the roadkill starts to die off, and it's only small animals here and there. But what happens next is something that I remember so vividly that I think about it every single time that I have to go on a whitefish run. I pull up, and there is this deer, its legs still kicking, and it was kind of alive, I think. I swear to God, there was a creature, something bent down over the carcass, just digging at the deer's abdomen. It looked like it was feeding or something. I stopped to watch it out of pure morbid curiosity. The thing looks so unnatural. The way it moves, the way it looks. It's all pale with patches of yellow and these really long limbs. So my headlights are on this thing, but it just keeps digging at the deer. It doesn't seem to give a shit that I'm there at all. It looks kind of humanoid, but extremely disproportionate. It reminds me of that scene from the movie Extra, where they see that weird creature on the side of the road, all bent forward and walking on all fours. So I peel out of there, obviously, and I'm driving 90, just all the way down the freeway. Before it was out of sight though, I looked back and it still didn't care at all that I was there. It was just there, digging at the deer. I think of that every time that I go on a whitefish run, like I said. This is my first time telling this story to anybody, but here goes. Me and some buddies decide to go out, quote, monster hunting one night when we can't go out and drink. We never actually find anything abnormal, we just go hunting around the desert. I live in the southwest. For random cool stuff, or we find a deer skeleton or find other animals while we're hyped up on junk food and caffeine from soda. So we stop at some gas station to get our supplies, nothing special. We head out to a few different places that we usually go to screw around like this, and you guessed it, nothing happens. So we end up trying this new place that we've never been to before. It's one of those places that had no trespassing signs all slapped over the place, which is nothing new, except this one had an old bloody shoe in front of the gate, but we thought nothing of it. We drive around in my buddy's truck for a while, with 2 guys in the bed and 2 guys in the cab. The 2 in the back have flashlights to look around the brush, and the entire time we all kind of agree there's this really weird feeling of eeriness or foreboding. We do this all the time, and it's not like this is something new to us, so for all of us to be on edge like this was a little strange. The farther and farther we keep going, the more old and screwed up looking clothes we start to see and find laying in the path. We end up hitting this dead end, so we go back to take another path. And besides seeing the ripped up and bloody clothes, the driver says that he saw something move, so he stops. We scan the area, and we don't see anything. None of us saw anything. It was the driver who saw it. And he says, I'm probably just being paranoid, I'll just keep driving. So we keep driving around until we come up on what looks like an old, screwed up looking farmstead. It's kind of derelict looking. There's old horse pens and chicken coops that are all falling down. We get out and start walking around. The whole entire time, the creepy feeling is getting worse and worse. Usually we would do this and it was just a fun time, but again, that feeling just really lingered. We keep walking around the plot of land and eventually walk down what seems to be a footpath. It was way too small for any vehicle. I had tossed in a dip earlier and left my can in my back pocket. As we walk around, we come across what seems to be an old campsite, but it looked also strangely relatively fresh. We stop at the campsite to talk for a bit about how creepy this is, and we decide to just leave well enough alone and go back. As we start walking away, we get a rock thrown at us. We were all walking fairly parallel, so none of us would have threw it, and we all knew that. So at this point, we just start hauling ass down the path. And I don't mean like regular oh shit ass hauling, I mean like the terror kind. So I end up tripping and falling on my way back to the truck on a rock. My dip and my wallet fall out. I don't really give a shit about $3 worth of tobacco. I'd rather have my life and my wallet instead. So I grab the wallet and keep going. We all eventually make it back to the truck with myself in last. We hop in and the driver guns it. This area was new to us, so we ended up taking a wrong turn. As we go down this new path, there's a slight hill to our left. We all agree that we took a wrong turn somewheres, but our truck is too big and the road is too narrow and small to do a 3-point turn. On top of the hill, there's an old truck. It's not too beat up, but it's not in great condition either. Its lights are off, but just the very presence of it makes us kind of spooked. As soon as we pass by it, the lights turn on. It quickly pulls out and goes down the path the way we came. The general consensus is that we're completely screwed. We pull up on another dead end, but this one is wide enough so we think that we're saved, as the truck dude hasn't been seen. We do the 3-point turn, and then we keep moving back down the trail. 30 seconds or so later, there's another truck following us, and it came from the direction of the dead end. And nobody has any clue where it came from because the dead end didn't have any paths leading off of it. I don't know where it could have hidden on, and nobody saw it until it came speeding after us. We're not far from this actual paved road, so we decide to just gun it and hopefully make it to safety before these wrong turn cultists end up trying to kill us. We get to the gate, and truck guy number 2 seems to have lost us. So I get out of the truck real quick and I open the gate up. However, I noticed that the shoe that was there before is still there, in relatively the same position. Only this time, my can of dip is lying right next to it. In 2005, I moved into a house in the outback of southern Australia. Pretty much every single person living on our street had only lived there for under 5 years, apart from the elderly couple that lived at the end of the street, that is. The elderly couple had lived on the street for 40 years and had raised their children on the street. They said that strange things happened in the street and a lot of people can't handle it and they leave. They never really went into what scared people, just saying that the whole street was haunted or something like that. But they did say it was only starting to happen in the early 90s. The first experience I had was only a week after moving in. I heard this low-pitched humming sound coming from the outside of my bedroom window. When I looked out, I saw this tall, black figure with long arms and long fingers, no discernible facial features. He was slightly transparent. He was backed up against the wall, holding up the garage area of my house. Due to its height, he had to hunch over. I was looking around for 5 seconds before it realized that I was looking at it. It turned its head towards me, and I quickly ran away from the window and ran and told my parents. My dad went out, and he saw nothing. As you can imagine, I was really sketched out, and I drew a picture of what I saw. After this, I started hanging out with the neighborhood kids, since we were all teenagers, and they told me their stories. They all described the exact same figures that I had seen. One of the kids was Aboriginal, and we would go visit his grandfather a lot. He called the entities Maya Mula or something like that, translated roughly to stranger man. He said that the Aboriginals in the area had been dealing with them long before the arrival of Europeans, and said that these things weren't of this land, meaning like they didn't belong there or they weren't native to there, and they would take children away and eat them. He said that the Aboriginals cast them behind the creek, but since the creek partially dried up, the stranger men had once again been able to get into the town. The town that I lived in was built directly over the previous Aboriginal settlement. This Aboriginal tribe wasn't nomadic and had remained in a small area for over 1,000 years. One day, me and my friends were playing cricket out on the flat patch of desert in between the road and my house. The sun was setting, and as we were packing up our stuff, we noticed that there were people off in the distance approaching the road. The closer they got, the more details that we could see, and we noticed that they were again fully black, tall, and they weren't walking, but they seemed to be almost floating. We could also hear a low-pitched humming sound that got louder the closer they got. We bolted back to my house. I told my parents, but my parents once again didn't believe us. I hassled my father enough to drive down on his motorbike to the area that we saw them approaching. After 9 minutes, he came back to the house, visibly shaken, saying that he saw them and that I wasn't allowed to go down there anymore. Every time I tried to get details on what happened, he would always get a nervous look on his face and change the subject. This one night, I was coming home from a party with my friends. As we passed by the empty lot in the street, we saw these two small figures sitting on tree stumps, just staring at us. One was bigger than the other, and once again, we heard that low-pitched humming sound. We were all kind of drunk and kind of high, and we were just standing there, laughing. We thought we were tripping out, until we realized that we were all seeing the exact same thing, and we all figured that we couldn't all be hallucinating the same thing. One of my mates took a step towards the one closer to us, and when he did, it made this deep growl. I have never heard anything like it. And to make a long story short, we screamed and ran to my house. I'm mentioning this because unlike the tall figures I had seen, and I'd seen them a lot at night, these things were completely physical, not transparent at all. They were shaped like babies, but didn't have a neck. Now this is where things start to heat up a bit. There used to be a group of kids that would take their dirt bikes beyond the creek, and we would go riding way out into the desert. One day, they didn't come home. Everyone just assumed that they had just gotten lost. They were found a week later, all 5 of them. They were alive, with no food and no water, out in the Australian outback for a week. What scared me was that one of the kids' younger brother told me. He said that his brother had said that they saw a light out in the desert, and they felt compelled to follow it. He said he felt like he was in some kind of trance, and they didn't stop following the light for the entire week they were out in the outback. He said no matter how far they kept traveling, they didn't seem to get anywhere close to it. He said if the farmer that had found them hadn't have found them, they never would have stopped following the light, and eventually would have died. Anyway, getting to the final part of the story, so my mother had gotten sick of me being scared all the time, and called her sister who lived in Adelaide to come visit. She's a psychic or something, or like a medium, I don't remember. So she comes down, and the moment she pulls up, she tells us not to tell her anything about what we've seen, that she's going to wander around the street for a while and come back and tell us what she saw. When she came back, she was visibly shaken. She told me that these things were unlike anything she's ever experienced, and that she had also run into the spirit of an old Aboriginal woman. The woman told her that her tribe were split off from the group the Tharawal, and they came to the area that would become the town that I lived in to escape the stranger men. But the stranger men followed them. The woman then showed her horrific images of these things, slaughtering Aboriginal children, eating them through a small slit in their mouth. The woman then told how she drowned herself in the creek so she would act as a spiritual barrier to keep them out. She said that this worked until a pyramid-shaped pathway was built facing the way that they had come from. This allowed them to come in once again, not the fact that the creek had dried up. The Aboriginal woman led my auntie down the path to show her something even more terrifying. After eating the small children, they would rebirth these kids to be their minions or something like that. My auntie said these things are completely physical and live out in the desert and sometimes come into town for food. She said these things are harmless and mainly just keep an eye on people for the stranger men. My auntie became confused and said if they were killing children just to make them into spies, then what was their motive in the first place? It was explained to her that they just seemed intent on inflicting pain and suffering on people. She said that they rape women and men alike, make women miscarriage, cause accidents, kill the weak. Despite this, they seemed to have a personal vendetta against the Aboriginal woman's tribe and seem intent on wiping them out. This is why they remain focused on the town. My auntie came to the conclusion that the stranger men aren't human spirits and aren't spirits at all. She believed that they were physical and reproducing race of beings. She thought that maybe they were some kind of extra-dimensional being or an alien. She said that she heard of similar beings all around the world. After hearing all of this, we put the house on the market and began preparations to leave. A couple of days before we left, I went on one last motorbike ride where my father had told me not to go. While riding along a dirt path, I saw this rock on the side of the path. It was weird because it looked like it was smoothed down a bit and had some markings on it. I don't know if it's related at all to what had been happening. I personally think it's somebody playing a joke because none of the engravings on it are Aboriginal, and the engravings on it are all over the place. Anyway, I took it with me when we moved. So yeah, this is my experience with the paranormal. I thought I'd share it, and it'd be great if someone else had an experience like this that they could share. So before I end the video, I just wanted to say thank you to a guy named James L. Boanerges, who he's an author, which I thought the fact that an author views the channel was super cool. So he offered, or his team, I think, whatever they are, the publishing company, something like that. Anyways, they offered to send me a book and a t-shirt, and I found out that there were stickers in it too, so I was pretty ecstatic about that. But the book is called Guised Passage, and there's going to be like a movie made out of it, and there's like a bunch of awards. The NIEA finalist, which is a National Indie Excellence Award, it was a finalist. There's been a bunch of awards that it's won, and I'm going to read it whenever I get a spare time to do that. But they also sent me a sick-ass t-shirt, so I'll put that in the video right about here. And yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to James and his people for sending the book over. It's super cool of them to do that. And I'll read the back of it, and I'll leave in like a link in the description if you want to buy it yourself. So yeah, thank you for tuning into the video. So here's what it says on the back of the book. 4 friends embark on their annual backpacking trip, this time into a remote section of the Canadian Rockies. Stumbling upon a canyon not marked on their map, the women choose to embrace adventure over the mundane and explore what the canyon has to offer. A chance meeting with an academic research team adds mystery when the friends learn the unsettling lore the local indigenous people subscribe to the canyon. The authentic wilderness experience becomes more than any of them bargained for when options, such as when, where, and how to leave the canyon, begin to narrow. For both the campers and the academic team, the promise of passage through the canyon might be foregone in a decision that was never theirs to make. So definitely check out the book if you want to. I'll leave the link in the description. And yeah, thank you again for sending me that book and that cool ass t-shirt. So, what'd you think of those stories? Let me know which one was your favorite one down in the comments. Do you have your own story that you want to send in? I have an email address below in the description along with ways to support the channel in case you're interested in that. And, yeah, that seems to be about it. So thank you for pulling up a stump. Remember to like and subscribe and all that good stuff. And I will see you in the next one, which is probably Sunday. So, see you then.